Historically, the Oakland Raiders were one of the most intimidating and feared teams in professional sports. And for a time, they were also the most winning team in football. For those of us that have forgotten, or for those of you not old enough to remember, the Raiders of the 60s, 70s, and 80s were good. They were very, very good. But times, like the seasons, change. And just like other great organizations, the cold winds of winter have not been kind to our proud Raider team, one that has been hibernating for 12 long years. For years, the rest of the AFC West has mocked us, looking at us as a sure win on their schedule. And now, as we head into a new season, the media and fans alike want you to believe that our team is too young, too inexperienced, or simply not ready. But beneath their scorn is a troubling fact. They're a little bit afraid again. The times they are a-changin', and a new wind blows in from the shore. The slumbering giant has again awakened, and this time with a new captain at the helm. That's right, Captain Jack and a fierce band of brigands led by Ken Norton Jr. and his crew of quarterback-hungry Raiders. Perhaps the commitment to excellence has returned. Perhaps it is once again our turn to be respected, our turn to be feared as a loss on other teams' schedules, our turn to win. So what do you think? Are the winds of change in the West really coming? Is the window currently open for this young team? Will it be this year, or will it be delayed while this team melds together? Will the Raiders return to excellence? This is our topic tonight, and this is the will to win.
That would burn brightest here is the will to win. Is the will to win. Is the will to win.
Your commitment to excellence and your will to win will endure forever. You were magnificent.
Let's go, boys. Let's go. Let's do our thing now.
The autumn wind is a pirate.
Clark feeling pressure in front of him. Has his man. It's Cooper. Cooper inside the 10. Into the end zone for the Raiders. Touchdown.
We're going to challenge you from the neck up this afternoon.
Eric target allowed for the end zone for Roberts. He's got it. Touchdown! Raiders!
Within the first 5 to 10 plays of the game, the other team's quarterback must go down. And he must go down hard.
Sacked from behind by the man.
The show will be broken down into 3 segments. A question and answer segment, our state of the AFC West, and a rookie bio segment featuring breakdowns and analysis of drafted and undrafted players that we all agree should produce at some level for the Silver and Black this year. Joining me tonight is a good friend of the Raider Nation, a founding senior analyst and co-host of The Will to Win, the Oakland Knight. Also joining us tonight is Raider Lion. He's our senior international analyst from the United Kingdoms, where he covers the Raiders. He's done a draft breakdown of our own draft picks on his channel, but as a proud member of the Raider Nation, he's agreed to help us out here on our show. All right, let's begin with our first segment, shall we, gentlemen? The Raider Nation has been kind enough to send in questions via email that they would like our opinions on. If you're interested in sending in your questions, please submit them via email to thewtw@gmail.com. Please remember to include your name and where you're sending your question from. Well, let's take a look at our first questions for the evening, shall we, gentlemen?
Okay, so our first email. Hey guys, great show. My question to you is simple. Reggie McKenzie has had 5 years to build this roster from the ground up. He has our roster filled with up-and-comers, but the win-loss record so far isn't that great. After 5 years of suffering, can Reggie finally say that he has a playoff contender, and can we keep competing for years to come? Thanks.
The way I see it is Reggie McKenzie, over the course of his tenure here in Oakland, has really done a spectacular job of really setting the stage not only for the short term, but for the long term. I mean, you got a guy here that's been in systems that he's been taught on how to draft, how to build a team, not only for short term, but long term. For example, going out and making sure that you have depth at quarterback is something that he learned over there in Green Bay. Not a lot of teams care to draft deep and have a lot of depth at quarterback. They tend to just to keep finding guys that have been discarded off other teams. So Reggie has done a great job of not only finding good young talent early in drafts, but late in drafts, and continuing that process as he's moved forward. So for the first time in a very long time, we finally have a team that is built for the long term instead of just a team that's maybe ready to make a 1 or 2 year run. Kind of like we saw Gruden build back in 2002 and 2003, where we had that short little 2-3 year window to make something happen, and then it all fell apart. This team is young, dynamic, and really built for the long term. When you take everything into consideration, his time in Jacksonville, his times with John Fox over at Denver, he's not only learned what kind of talent he's looking for, but he's really learned how to manage all aspects of being a head coach. Because when it comes to head coach, your job is to manage as well as to motivate. And I think you see that Jack Del Rio is coming into his own when it comes to those things. That's also going to help us in the immediate future and beyond.
Our next question is, I'm pumped for the season. We have retooled this roster into a young, fast, hardworking unit. Every year, teams add pieces to the puzzle, but 1 or 2 always seem to fail, while 1 or 2 really excel. From the crop of players either in free agency like Osamele or Smith to the young guys like Joseph or Calhoun, who do you guys think will have the biggest impact?
We got a lot of great additions this offseason, so it's really hard just to pin it down just to one player. But when you look across the board and you look at players like Kelechi and you look at players like DeAndre Washington on the offensive side of the ball, and then you jump on the defensive side of the ball where we really attacked in this offseason, man. I mean, we really went with guys like Sean Smith, a great veteran, Reggie Nelson, a great veteran, even Bruce Irvin, 4 years in the league, a veteran in his own right. Which one of these guys do I feel is going to be the most impactful? It's really tough to say, but I like a pass rush. I really like to develop a pass rush and get after the quarterback. I think that's the key. I really like the play in the trenches. So it's safe to say that, you know, it could be either guys like Jihad Ward, Shalik Calhoun, or Bruce Irvin. But with Bruce Irvin's experience, his nastiness, if you will, he has this ability to really play hard and get after it, but yet Seattle never gave him the opportunity to really go after the quarterback. So when I sit here and I think of a guy that can make a big impact, I try to look for maybe the hungriest player on the field. Bruce Irvin is going to have that opportunity to be that quarterback killer. I think that's going to light something inside Bruce Irvin that's going to make him one of our biggest impact players of 2016. It's fair to say that Kelechi Osemele's between a rock and a hard place when it comes to being recognized as impactful, especially when he plays next to guys like Donald Penn and Rodney Hudson, who made a big impact for us last year. As far as Kelechi Osemele really helping out a guy like DeAndre Washington make an impact this season, I like Kelechi Osemele for the simple fact that I think in general he kind of gives a boost to the running game. But he's not going to necessarily do it on his own. You know, none of these guys are. It's a team sport. But I do believe that Kelechi Osemele finishes off. He rounds off the offensive line real nicely with Rodney Hudson, Gabe Jackson, Donald Penn. And we're hoping to see Medelec Watson emerge himself over on the right tackle side. But even if it's Austin Howard. So I really believe that it's going to make a big impact on the offensive line and how it works as a whole. But I think there's a lot more pieces to it than just Kelechi Osemele. So that's a tough one to call for me. This defense has totally been retooled, especially in the trenches like we've been talking about, which I believe is going to be the biggest key component to making this defense go. I mean, Bruce Irving, I talked about how I feel he's going to have the greatest impact, but when you look at players like Jahad Ward, Shalik Calhoun, guys that really possess a speed and a burst that's going to work really good on the inside. And then you add a guy like Mario Edwards Jr., who's looking and seems to be back on the right track health-wise. Well, then now we're looking at something that is going to create a pass rush up the middle as well on the outside. And all that's going to do is create problems for opposing quarterbacks. But most importantly, it's going to create opportunities for our secondaries, especially a guy like Sean Smith coming over from Kansas City. It should be very exciting to see how this develops over the course of the year.
Surprised everyone, including myself last year, by holding his own in a very poor secondary. With the addition of Smith and the possible emergence of Carey, Thorpe, or Hayden, it's up to Amerson to prove last year wasn't a fluke. Do you guys think Amerson will regress like he did in Washington, or hold off the young but talented cornerbacks in their second year under Norton?
David Amerson is going to be a huge asset on this football team. I know there could be a lot of speculation on how good he's going to be in our system in the second year. But when you look at what he was able to accomplish last year in this zone coverage, it speaks a lot of volume for exactly what Ken Norton and Jack Del Rio are looking for inside this system. I talk a lot this year about system fit, and David Amerson is a returning piece that is exactly that. So as we move forward in 2016 and we look at our secondary and we look at the loss of a guy like Charles Woodson or an addition like Sean Smith, it's all about system fit. So to replace Charles Woodson, they bring a guy in like Reggie Nelson, who might not be at a high caliber level as we felt Charles Woodson was, but Charles Woodson was left last year to do a lot of the load in the secondary. Where if you look how we're built this year, it's not just Reggie Nelson, so he doesn't necessarily have to be Charles Woodson from last year. He just needs to be Reggie Nelson. We got guys like Sean Smith, we got guys like David Amerson, and we brought in a guy like Carlos Joseph in the draft, and together they're going to be a fit. I think it's going to pay huge dividends. I mean, we got a lot of new pieces, but we're mixing them in with some old pieces that already understand exactly what Ken Norton is trying to do. We also have our secondary coaches like Rod Woodson and Marcus Robinson, two guys that, well, they're Hall of Famers in their own right and are very great coaches. I mean, I'm a little skeptical at times with Rod Woodson, but I really like how he rounded it off last year, getting Amerson up to speed. And all reports say that a guy like DJ Hayden is having a great minicamp and OTAs. So we're all looking forward to seeing what he brings into training camp. And that's not even talking yet about TJ Carey. So when you look at Marcus Robinson and Rod Woodson as coaches, you add that with the brilliant mind like Ken Norton, with a leader like Jack Del Rio, you got four great defensive minds right there. I think it's going to be huge, especially with the new pieces being veterans and the younger pieces being returning pieces. It's a great fit in 2016. Yeah, there's a lot of people that believe that, you know, Reggie McKenzie really dropped the ball when it came to DJ Hayden. And this is his last opportunity to really correct that. And whether he's a Raider next year or not, whether he wants to be mad at the Raider Nation or anybody else for all the bad things that we've said about him over the years, this is his prove it year. So whether or not he's a Raider next year or not, he needs to come in, he needs to ball out. And players seem to raise their game just that much more when it comes to their final year of their contract, when they know that they either got to make a name for themselves somewhere else, or to just stay and be a Raider and be a part of something special. And we already seen that this team is ready to do that.
Okay, and our last question. Liam here from the UK. Great show, guys. Keep it up. Amari Cooper could have had an even better bloody season than he did last year if he didn't have so many dropped balls. Do you blokes think this is a problem that will follow him throughout his career and threaten his overall success? Shout out to Lion from Notting Hill. Great insight, mate.
I really feel that Amari Cooper is poised for another excellent season. And just like every player, we could sit and look at each player, whether it's on a Raider roster or anyone else, and pick out their faults from the year past. However, when you look at Amari Cooper and all the great things he was able to do with over 1,000 yards receiving, all the touchdowns, the big plays, I think that he showed us everything that we needed to see moving forward that's going to make him not only a Pro Bowl to come consistently, but probably a top 5 receiver in the NFL. His drop passes are a big concern, but it was his rookie year. You saw how people attacked him. You saw what guys were doing to him, trying to rough him up and rattle his cage, get in his head, and then he got injured. I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you that Amari Cooper is the next Jerry Rice. All I'm trying to state is that your rookie season, there's a lot of bad things that could happen and a lot of good things that could happen. And the fact that he was able to go for 1,000 yards and in his rookie season just leads me to believe that now that he's more comfortable, more spoken, more of a leader in his own right, he'll start catching the ball a lot more too, which is just going to make his numbers go even higher. I'm excited. Oh yeah, comparing him to even a guy like Antonio Brown, this guy is the complete package. That's what we have to be excited for. He's not one of those guys where you have in Wes Welker who's good on the slant and taking it to the house, or the San Francisco 49ers right now have Torrey Smith. He's a one-trick pony. Amari Cooper is the full package. He could take a slant, he could take an out route and go to the house. Throw him a little screen pass behind the line of scrimmage. We already seen what he could do with that. I mean, he has great feet, great speed. He could run the go route. The sky's the limit for this guy. I mean, you take the drop passes, like we said, you take them drop passes away from him, and you make at least half of those or a third of those catches, he's Rookie of the Year. Offensive Rookie of the Year, hands down. I think he would even outdid Todd Gurley. But you consider he dropped a lot of passes, I think that's what hurt him. But this sky's the limit. I can't wait.
The Oakland Knight here. Wanted to remind you all that coming up, July 30th, 2016, San Buenaventura Beach, Ventura, California, from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. will be the 8th annual Raider Nation Bonfire. So grab your friends, your family, and your booster clubs and head out to the beach for one Raider time. And make sure to subscribe to stay up to date to all Raider Nation events happening this summer. This message is brought to you by the Will to Win broadcast. We'll see you at the beach.
All right, folks, welcome back. So we're changing up the segment just a little bit this week. We're going to go ahead and talk about the state of the AFC West. So we're going to look at teams like Denver, the San Diego Chargers, and the Kansas City Chiefs and ask the question, have the Raiders caught up to those particular teams, and will we be able to get over the hump and pass those teams to take the division? So what we're going to do is start off by asking a question. I'll ask a question to the Knight, and he can agree or disagree, and then we'll go back and forth. So the first question tonight is the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos have lost a couple of key members from their defense, and while they may only be two particular players, they're very, very good players at their position. They've also got problems along the offensive line and some uncertainty at quarterback where Paxton Lynch and Mark Sanchez are taking over the reins from a Hall of Famer. So, partner, do you feel like the Denver Broncos are going to win the division again this year?
In my opinion, as we sit here today, just barely in the middle of June, I'm going to say, yeah, I do believe that the Denver Broncos, as of right now, will be number one in our division, only because to be the best, you got to beat the best. And over the course of the last 5 to 6 years, they've been the top of the AFC West year in and year out. So they're our biggest test. They're our biggest challenge. I understand that they lost some key pieces, Malik Jackson, Danny Trevathan, and I understand they have a lot of depth. That's where I think a lot of people misunderstand what it is the Broncos really lost. They lost depth. Anytime that you lose your key players, your starters, you're moving your depth pieces up. Well, what's behind them? So I think a lot of the times I call it arrogance when I talk about the Denver Broncos, just because a lot of the fans of the Broncos want to feel like, well, we were the number one defense. Well, that's why I say, even though they lost those key pieces, that number one defense might end up being like maybe the number 6 defense or the number 8th defense in the league. It's still going to be a nice test for our Raiders. So I'm not going to be cocky enough to say, hey, we are the best in the West at this point. We got to go out and prove it. So I will give them the respect, but I think the Bronco fans and the rest of the league need to understand that they lost a lot. They lost a lot of key pieces. And as far as quarterback goes, that could go either way. I mean, a guy like Brock Osweiler, he showed that he could win in that system with that defense. So Mark Sanchez, even though that maybe he fits the system a lot better, and maybe Paxton Lynch does too, we have to wait to see. But I do believe that they'll be similar to what they were last year, but a few steps back. That's what I believe gives us the opportunity. The door is open, cracked open if you will at this point, just waiting for Jack Del Rio and his boys to come kick the door down. That's the way I feel.
Well, when you look at Jackson and Trevathan being in the middle of that defense, I mean, you know, that they've got a good rush from the outside, but these guys were the meat and potatoes of that defense. That middle of the defense now is definitely weaker. They're not as stout, and if you look at the depth chart, the guys that they currently have, even though Trevathan was getting older, there's nobody right now on that team that I think is going to replace what he does or what Malik does on that defensive line. And I know it was a salary cap issue because of the Von Miller situation. You got a lot of money invested. So you can't keep everybody, I mean, and keep that defense completely intact. But in my opinion, while you can say, yes, they only lost 2 players, those were 2 very important pieces, your middle linebacker and your starting defensive tackle. Those are 2 key pieces, particularly in the type of offense, that fast, speedy defense that plays a lot of man coverage that Denver has. You know, they want to stop the run, right, first, and then they want to be able to go after you and get the pass. So they may not drop very far, but I don't believe that they're going to be a #1 defense in the NFL this year. What do you think about their offensive line, partner? You think that that's getting any better?
Their offensive line is not that top rated anyway. I mean, that's one of their struggles last season, was their offensive line and being able to protect guys like Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler. So even though I feel that, you know, not being a full-on expert of what the Denver Broncos did this offseason, it's fair to say that they didn't make their offensive line what the Raiders made their offensive line this offseason. So better, yes. Dominant, no. I think that there could be a struggle there, because they have to play other teams in the West that bring serious pass rush. You know, you have Kansas City, who always has a great defensive front, and then you look at the defensive front that we built. That offensive line and then quarterback, whether it's Paxton Lynch or Mark Sanchez, could be in very big trouble early and often.
Okay, the Kansas City Chiefs will be right there in the hunt for the AFC West early on. But I think the schedule doesn't offer them too many favors. They're a talented defense, but it's going to have a tough challenge right away without one of their key players, Justin Houston, and an offense that has already hit a ceiling. I think they're going to slide out of the playoffs this year at the end. What do you think, partner?
I do believe that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to find themselves falling out of the playoffs. When I look at what the Chiefs have done in the past few years, they usually start fast and finish slow, or start slow and finish fast. So I see the same kind of MO happening here. I mean, they have the great running game, okay? They have Jamar Charles. But when I look at what our division has done defensively, especially on the defensive line side of the ball, I don't see that, you know, Jamar Charles coming off a big injury is going to have as much of an impact as he has in the past years. So is Jamar Charles going to be the same guy? Or is it going to be another Alex Smith trying to be more than he is, more than a game manager? I think that's what really affects him.
Yeah. Kansas City, they may have some problems moving forward. You know, they've had so many problems in the past, you know, going the entire season without a wide receiver scoring a touchdown, or, you know, the running back continuously tearing his ACL, coming out having a fantastic season, and then, every other year just kind of like, tearing his ACL. It's happening over and over, particularly on the offensive side of the ball with these guys. They still have a great defense. Eric Berry coming back from cancer was, he played phenomenal again. And they've got a pass rush, even without Justin Houston. They're able to get to the quarterback because of their scheme. And like you said, it's kind of one of those things where, teams that start fast and then burn out, or teams that start out really slow, and then by the time they get up to speed, it's just a little bit too late. They need one or two more games. Like the San Diego Chargers did a couple of years ago. It's just a little too little, a little bit too late. You've got to be, kind of one of these slow burning type of teams, just continuously making a little bit of progress, not having a November like the Chargers used to have, losing 4 or 5 games early and then, turning it on at the end of the season and getting into the playoffs at 8-8 or, 9-7, something of that nature. But so, like I said, the offense for Kansas City is very vanilla. They have a good running game, but you never know what it's going to be. The left tackle they drafted, he might be a bust. Alex Smith, he's a good game manager, but that's pretty much about all he is. So I think that's going to be a problem to try to gain momentum as some of these teams like the Broncos, the Raiders, the Patriots, teams that are younger and they have much more talent are kind of going to be hitting their stride. Teams like Kansas City, I think, are other than good coaching, they're probably going to slide and, again, just be a vanilla type of team. If we talk Denver, if we talk even San Diego, I mean, there's so much, flavor to talk about there. So many different things that they could do, running the ball, throwing the ball. They've got, all-stars at different positions. But, when you talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, yes, good defense. Yes, they can run the ball. But once again, it's something that you just, there's just no feeling there of, hey, I'm going to back this particular football team. So unfortunately, I agree. At the end of the day, I think, to me, they're probably an 8-8 and 9-7 type of team in a division that has a lot of talent on both sides of the ball.
I agree. I believe we're a balanced football team, and that's what everybody needs to understand. We're not coming in like the Broncos, defensive heavy question mark on the offensive side of the ball, or Kansas City, one-dimensional on offense with a running game and then a pass rush and an aging defense on the other side. We are a young football team on both sides of the football, and we're both growing at an even rate, I would say, at this point, because we started off fast ourselves and fell off. So a balanced attack versus a lot of these one-trick ponies, that's what makes me think that we have the edge. But I still look at it as Denver's the team that we have to take out, and that should be our focus. So I'll give them number 1 for now, but we're coming.
The San Diego Chargers. The Chargers got some good building blocks in free agency. Travis Benjamin, also in the draft with Bosa, and Travis Henry, the tight end. But there remain some questions about the effectiveness of their offensive and defensive fronts. Do you think that they've done enough to crawl out of the basement in the NFL's toughest division?
I believe that their conditions are similar to where we were maybe even a year or two ago. So when you look at the San Diego Chargers, and the way that I feel about them is they're a team that, when you look at what they did last season, it was a lot of down to the wire games that they could not finish. So we look at the San Diego Chargers record and we automatically want to point the finger at them and say, bottom dwellers, they shouldn't be contending for this division, that they're still going to be bottom dwellers. I think they could compete with Kansas City, in my opinion. I do still see them down at number 4, because I believe that even with the changes that they made, we all have made changes, so we're all going to get better in areas and maybe even fall in some. So even where San Diego has gone up, I do believe that a lot of these other teams at Kansas City, the Raiders, and Denver have made improvements or still outranked them in a lot of areas. So, Rivers cannot be denied. He's a great quarterback. They got great receivers. I'm just not sure about their running game at this point.
Yeah, and in my opinion, I think they should have drafted a tackle instead of a defensive end. I mean, they got a 43 defensive end, like I said earlier, that they're putting into a 43 scheme. I can sort of understand the idea that everybody else in the AFC West and the Super Bowl champion, they've got good pass rush. But what they're really trying to do is copy something almost ineffectively. The Raiders and the rest of the teams in the AFC West, they were building pass rush because of the quarterbacks in the AFC West. We drafted Khalil Mack because you've got Phillip Rivers, you've got, Peyton Manning. So you want to build that pass rush. You want to be able to get to the quarterback. But Joey Bosa is not that type of pass rusher. San Diego doesn't need to build a pass rush. They need to be able to protect their quarterback. If you look at their offensive line play, it was horrible. And it's going to continue to be a problem this year. I think they think that the guys that they had there maybe were injured and they shuffled them around. But even when healthy, this offensive line has shown that it is not a very good offensive line. I'm going to say it over and over again. You got to have a good left tackle. You got to have a good right tackle. You got to be good in the interior. You have to be able to help your running back get, some space. And I just don't think that this particular offensive line is capable of doing that. Look at Derek Carr. Our offensive line blocks for him. They open up some holes. They're even better this year. They're strong in the middle. They've got some offensive tackles that are holding their own. They're not getting abused. They're not giving up 5 sacks a game like, Denver's offensive line was to Khalil Mack. You have to build from your lines, from your offensive line and from your defensive line. It's not sexy. Khalil Mack is the sexy pick. Maybe even Joey Bosa, in his own way, may have been the sexy pick for this particular team. But I think they probably could have traded back 5, 6, 8 slots, still got a really good tackle, and still would have been able, in a very defensive line strong draft, they could have picked a guy in the second round that would have been first round quality. I mean, they were picking so high, you slide down in the first round, maybe to 10, 12, 13, still pick up one of the top tier tackles. You're picking at 4 in the second round? That's a first round talent that you would be getting at defensive end, right? Or perhaps a pass rushing outside linebacker. So, again, we got some guys in the third round that nobody thought would be there. So they could have even waited until the third round to probably get more pass rush production, than they're going to get out of Joey Bosa. And, I think Phillip Rivers is going to spend a lot of time this season on his back.
And those are great points that you've made, Pirate. And when I look at it from another perspective too, in the same way, is they go out and they get the pass rusher, and they're thinking they're competing with what the Raiders have, the Chiefs have, and even Denver has, which is great defensive trenches. They bring the heat. They're going to be able to get after the quarterback. But when you look at what they were last season, and you look how often their offensive line struggled and how Phillip Rivers got hurt and beat all the time, the best way you can combat teams in your division that have strong pass rushes is to build a really strong offensive line. Once again, I think that's why a lot of people take notice to what the Raiders are becoming, because they're not just going one side of the ball. We've got a great defensive front, a great offensive line front, a great quarterback, young receivers. I mean, I like the balance that we possess. And when I look at the rest of the division, although I see some very strong points in strong areas that they possess, at the end of the day, they're just one-sided. They're not a dual threat like we're becoming.
Okay, so here's the question. Can the Raiders win the AFC West with Derek Carr, Khalil Mack, a good coaching staff, and a solid young core surrounding them?
Our 2016 Oakland Raiders are most definitely going to be playoff bound. I believe the only people that can keep the Raiders out of the playoffs is the Raiders themselves. This team has been building for this moment for years, especially the last 4. And when you look at what we've been talking about all night, all the examples that we have given you here tonight, it is so obvious that this team is balanced both offensively, defensively, and most importantly, well coached. All these factor in with a young, dynamic quarterback, a young, dynamic wide receiver, young, dynamic running backs, and a stout offensive line. That's just the offensive side of things. When you look at the defensive side of things, a young, dominating Khalil Mack, a nice veteran opposite him now, a bookend in Bruce Irvin, a secondary that's actually going to be able to play the coverage that Norton is trying to put in place, to play top down and actually make a difference when our pass rush gets to the quarterback, mixed in with a lot of veterans. Like I said, the only thing that could hold us out of the playoffs is ourselves. So when I look at the rest of the division, when I look at Denver at the top, and then Kansas City last year, then us, and then you look at the Chargers, we're the one team that is on the rise with youth, balance, and a coaching staff that understands exactly the fit that they're looking for. 2016 is poised for the Raiders to make a charge, to make that push, to take out the Broncos and be AFC West champions even.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, partner. Our schedule is favorable. I think our division right now is favorable. The fact of the matter is that nobody's taking anybody for granted, but the fact of the matter is that Denver, they're a good team, but they don't know what they're going to do at quarterback, and they've got issues on the offensive line. We saw that last year. The same thing goes for San Diego. They don't have an offensive line. They're not very strong along the defensive line. These should be the 2 most offensive teams in the division outside of the Raiders. Both of them are going to have problems keeping their quarterbacks upright. And then, like we talked about, the Kansas City Chiefs have a ceiling that I just don't think they're going to be able to get above. There's not a lot of difference, I struggle with the Alex Smith thing a lot because I ask myself, is Alex Smith, we've called Phyllis and Alice, is it going to take more than Alex Smith to get this team into the playoffs? They've got to have a healthy running back. They've got to have a good offensive line play, good wide receiver play. The defense is going to have to stay healthy and not regress. They are well coached. You got to give them that. But in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, the schedule is favorable for us because we get our tough games at home. And the division, for the first time, is really in flux. You haven't been able to say that in the last 8 years. I mean, San Diego or Denver has had a stranglehold on this division. And then Kansas City, kind of got in there a little bit. But in reality, it's been pretty much San Diego, and then I think the Chiefs came in one year, and then the Broncos have come in, and the whole Peyton Manning thing just dominated the division. So again, at the end of the day, the division is in flux, and that's good. That's good when you've got a young, talented, up-and-coming, well-coached team, because it gives them the confidence to, you're not going in to face a Hall of Famer anymore. You're not going in to face Phillip Rivers, Antonio Gates, LaDainian Tomlinson, just a powerhouse of a team. These are 2 teams, again, that are in flux. And Kansas City, I just don't think that they're going to have a very good team. I believe that we're going to sweep Kansas City. Schedule-wise, player-wise, our depth, the coaching, a division in flux. These are all good signs when you think about what we're going to do this year. So I totally agree, and I believe that we will be in the playoffs this season.
I couldn't agree more. It is time. The time is now. I've been saying it all night. I think the wait is over. I think it's been too long of a wait, but at the same time, the wait is over. And I think that's where a lot of the excitement comes from the Raider Nation. I mean, we've been waiting a long time for this. Whether you're an older fan or a younger fan, this has been something that we all been waiting for too long. And I can't wait to kick off 2016 NFL football, because for once, I think we'll actually be in the mix all season long, and I'm excited about that.
Okay, folks, well, we hope you enjoyed that state of the AFC West. Now we're going to go ahead and go out to commercial, and when we come back, we'll be taking a look at our Rookie of the Week. Tonight we're going to be talking about DeAndre Washington. So for that, let's send it on over to Raider Lion.
The Oakland Raiders selected DeAndre Washington in the 5th round of the 2015 NFL Draft, and I truly believe that he has been criminally underrated by all NFL draft analysts. I truly believe that he can be a difference maker, not only on 1st and 2nd down for the Oakland Raiders, but also primarily on 3rd down, where I can believe he can have a truly fantastic impact for the Oakland Raiders and contribute massively and be a big impact for the team, not only in the coming years, but in future years and along the road and eventually. I think he can be a perfect guy who can step in for Latavius Murray if he gets injured. He's got that turn of pace that we look for and that we have lacked in the last couple of seasons. It's going to be interesting to see how he develops, but at this moment, when watching film, DeAndre Washington, the 5th round pick from Texas Tech, is exceptionally exciting. After coming off his most successful year as a senior, where he achieved 1,492 yards and 14 touchdowns, this is according to NFL.com, one can see that he clearly has exceptional feet, as the ability to turn pace and change direction instantly and turn on a dime. Even though he lacks height and is undersized considering too many NFL draft team needs at 5'8", he makes up for it in heart, determination, willpower and technique. Technique primarily in footwork, as he's able to get through holes through changing pace, moving laterally, which is brilliant, in other words, juking, and also moving upfield as quickly as possible and eluding tacklers. He has exceptional acceleration. This allows him to get from 0 to 60 at the quickest possible time, which means that he's able to catapult through holes and be an impact. This can translate to the NFL very easily, which means he could have an exceptionally big impact in games, especially when defenses are tired and you're looking for that change of pace running back to come in and explode through the hole and make a difference. Not only that, he shows confidence in his ability. He's able to prove himself time and time again, and he's shown that he is not afraid of making a mistake. Not only that, he's bounced back from many mistakes, sometimes a tackle for loss, for example, and gone for 10, 12, or even 14 odd yards or more on certain plays. He's shown tenacity, drive, and confidence to excel and believe in his ability. Many will look at DeAndre Washington and consider him an outside threat, a 3rd down receiver, but he can take it up the interior, and he can fight for those yards where it matters the most. His size, even though it is 5'8", he fights for those yards and is a strong, compact running back. Many people would compare him to such people as Chris Ivory, for example. This is my comparison of Chris Ivory, as he's small, compact, and can fight and drive, and through tenacity, confidence, determination, and speed, he's able to fight for those extra yards and make a difference. Further in regard to technique, it is clear that he keeps his pad level square and maintains his balance at most times. This is critical for a running back who wants to elude blockers, which he also does fantastically, as it's noticeable on tape that he has a fantastic stiff arm, and noticeable at times that he's able to elude blockers through not only technique, as footwork as already mentioned, but through keeping his balance, through staying upright, shoulders square, and being able to fight through blockers. His ability to elude tacklers is probably one of his main assets, and hopefully if this continues into the NFL, he should be a very valuable asset, as already mentioned, to the Oakland Raiders. Yet, many would argue that he's purely been brought in to be a 3rd down asset, because Latavius Murray, who was voted a Pro Bowl last season, is the primary number 1 back. I would argue that he can be this playmaker if it is desired. He has the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield and turn upfield and make a difference. This ability is rare, but it is highly valued. The Oakland Raiders signed free agent Roy Halou 2 years ago, hoping that he was going to be able to be this difference maker. Yet he has proved to be lacking in certain qualities. And so now DeAndre Washington may even fill in his boots and be that difference maker that we need, that we want, and that we hope for, so that he can make a difference, turn upfield, and be a difference on third down to get those 2, 3, 4 yards out of the backfield through either carrying the ball or through a catch. Even though an AFC South personal executive claimed that his size was a major issue and it would be the reason he would go undrafted, I would disagree completely with this notion and argue that DeAndre Washington was the best pick available in the 5th round in terms of running backs. Even though other options were available, such as Paul Perkins, DeAndre Washington has proved on tape and time again that he can be a valuable asset to a team and make a notable difference. If he continues the success he's had at the college level into the NFL, he could arguably be one of the steals of this draft class, and ultimately in the future, teams may be looking back and wishing they'd selected him in the 5th round, or even earlier.
That would burn brightest here is the will to win. Is the will to win. Is the will to win.
Your commitment to excellence and your will to win will endure forever. You were magnificent.
Let's go, boys. Let's go. Let's do our thing now.
The autumn wind is a pirate.
Clark feeling pressure in front of him, has his man, it's Cooper. Cooper inside the 10, into the end zone for the Raiders, touchdown.
We're going to challenge you from the neck up this afternoon.
They're target a lot for the end zone for Roberts. He's got it. Touchdown! Raiders!
Within the first 5 to 10 plays of the game, the other team's quarterback must go down. And he must go down hard.
Sacked from behind by Khalil Mack.